Welcome back to Morning Coffee. I am Mark Cook, along with Keith Reynolds. We're glad that you joined us this morning. And we're talking to Scott Rudder from Burton Trent Public Affairs LLC Consultants. How are you today, Scott?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
We're doing well, thanks. So first things first, tell us a little bit about you, your background,
Sure.
where you're coming from, and all that great stuff.
Right. Well, well, first of all, thanks for having me here. I'm a political person. I started out, got a degree in political science, went to West Virginia University. My first job, out of college was working for Congressman Jim Saxton down in D.C., so I worked on military and veterans issues. So my first foray out in the real world was, down in D.C., so it was a whole different type of environment. That transitioned into a job with working for Governor Whitman here in Trenton, here in New Jersey in Trenton, and I worked on military and veterans issues for her. That transitioned to a couple of other jobs I had over the years, working staff positions, Director of Legislative Affairs for New Jersey Transit. So I've had on a professional level, I had a political experience and so forth. And then, when I was 27 years old, the town I grew up in Medford, was going through some changes I wasn't too happy with, and so I got involved and ran for township council. So it was the youngest mayor in Medford's history at one point, and I did that for about 10 years, and then I started to sort of recognize that the challenges of being a local official when there's a lot of state mandates on how townships are run and how they do things. So I decided to get involved at the state level, and so I ran for state assembly in 2007 and served 3 terms, 6 years. Last day in office was January of 14, and I haven't looked back as far as having had great experiences there. But my kids hit that age where they need dad more at home and be more involved, so I sort of looked at my experience and where I could apply that. During all that time, I had spent 13 years working for Lockheed Martin, was doing business development work. So you look at the the political jobs I've had and professional jobs I've had, and you kind of marry that up with something that would be involved in business development, government relations, and I found Burton Trent, Michael Turner, who's the principal partner there, and I go way back and had discussions, and I joined up with the firm this past January.
What do you guys specialize in over there?
Well, it's a public affairs firm, so anything that touches the public in some fashion. So, public relations, crisis communications, business development work, government relations. So we cover the gambit of different issues that will touch the public in some way. So, we work with government officials, we work with private enterprise. We represent people in all different fields.
So, I don't want to veer too far off topic, but in terms of like a public relations crisis, like maybe a governor saying that he's going to bring a mop to a southern New Jersey town when it's flooded, it's kind of reacting to stories like that and giving, kind of the direction of which way that these guys need to handle things like that.
Well, in that case, they have, governors have their own spokespeople, and mayors do too. This would be more of a corporation that has an issue,
Okay.
right? So a corporation that has an issue, maybe a truck issue or environmental issue or something like that, something unexpected, an employee did something or whatever it might be.
So it's more corporations, businesses,
Correct.
rather than, I just know because your background is so political that I thought maybe you might be like the political specialist or...
No. Well, again, we do have that too. I mean, we have, on our background and our depth of our firm, we do have that. But out on the, as far as clients, the clients that depend on us, are clients that hopefully never need us.
Right.
Right. So you hope that you never have a crisis to deal with.
Right.
But if you do, you want us.
Right.
So,
That's
so
sort of the
in other
objective.
words, are you saying like Chipotle, like?
So Chipotle, so not a client of ours for full
Right.
disclosure, but
Right.
that's a perfect example. Where they had issues, and it was E. coli, I forget what it was, but it was they had a health scare a little while ago. And I think when they've gone through the investigation, it turns out it was there was actually a virus going on within the employees as opposed to
Right.
something out of the farm or something like that. But yeah, that's a crisis communication opportunity where they are dealing with something that they were not planning on. It was not expected. The difference between crisis communications and like general PR. Well, PR is where you're going to promote this next new thing you're going to roll out.
Right.
And you're going to announce something
Right.
major. Crisis communications is what it is.
It's
crisis.
reaction.
Stuff's happened, and you
something
need to get it
bad just
corrected.
happened.
Right.
And how do we deal with the public? How do we, either minimize something, or if it is something very serious, how do you address it honestly and openly, so that the public trusts, what you're saying, and in dealing with it in a very forthright manner.
Well, and that's an interesting case because what they chose to do was to get out in front of it very publicly. They cleaned all their restaurants. They made sure all the news outlets were there to watch the spray downs and all that
Perfect.
stuff.
Exactly.
And how much more of that was for show versus actual effectiveness? Because really, they only had issues at a couple stores, but then the next thing you know, the entire chain was shut down.
Right.
And they wanted to make sure that they were showing that they were being proactive about the issue.
Right. And that's the thing, because their clients, their customers, are repeat customers. I mean, it's a phenomenal chain restaurant,
is.
right?
It's a great model. It's a great model.
Great model. And what they did is they say, hey, look, you could trust us. We're going to handle this, and we're going to handle this in a very open manner. You're going to see, so they do invite the press in, they do invite other folks in, because they want their customers to understand they took this very seriously. They took a very proactive approach, and they handled it terrifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even say something like that versus one of the big oil spills, you know what I mean? That's crisis management.
Yeah, BP.
BP,
So,
right.
they dumped in billions of dollars. They were getting horrible press.
Horrible press.
You remember in the very beginning, I mean, there was some arrogance at the leadership level of the corporation, and you can't have that. I mean, you now when you see the BP commercials, you're not seeing the CEOs or other folks. You're seeing the gentleman or the woman who works for BP, lives in that community.
Yeah.
You see them being very personal.
You're seeing birds flying.
Yeah.
You're seeing all of this wonderful imagery because they did. You talk about screwing up a bad situation and making it worse.
Worse.
That's the best example maybe in recent history.
Absolutely. And you know what? People expect that their governments or the corporations are going to have their best interests. And if you're not doing that, if you're not showing that, then you're failing who your base is.
Right.
And you really have to address that. And if you have a leader, so if you have a leader who doesn't understand it, doesn't grasp it, then you're going to have a bigger problem. Part of what you do in crisis communications is the management of the message, working with the leadership, saying, "Hey, look, this is very important. We have to address this openly, transparently, and we got to deal with it quickly. People depend on us to do the right thing, make sure we respond correctly." So a lot of crisis communications also, it's just coaching.
Right.
It's coaching the leadership. It's coaching employees. It's helping people to make sure that they're messaging the right issue, whatever it is, because most corporations don't know what that's going to be. Now, if you're in the oil business, you probably have a crisis communications plan.
Right.
I'm going to gather that the CEO at the time was not following the crisis communication strategy too well.
Oh, the guys like you on his team, I'm sure were going nuts.
You
and
can't
pulling their
say
hair
that
out.
on
You
TV.
can't do that, right? Yeah, it's really interesting because I think that it really does put the pressure on a guy like you. Because if you have somebody that doesn't understand what is actually going on, they may be saying the right words, but they're not saying them the right way.
Right.
And that is so important that I can imagine you sitting across a desk and telling a CEO, listen, you're saying the words. I know what I wrote down, you're saying the words, but I don't believe you.
Right.
It's like acting. You need to be real in your acting
Absolutely.
or you're not believable. And I imagine that it's important to coach these guys to make sure that they're saying the right thing the right way.
Whether it's retail or government or otherwise, people expect these things of the leadership. With the government officials, they expect it from the businesses that they're going to provide money to. So if I'm going to go back to Chipotle, if I'm going to go to a BP gas station, I want to know that you've addressed these things. Otherwise, I'm going to put my money someplace else. Mm-hmm. Or from a political perspective, I'm going to give my vote to someone else.
Right.
Okay. We're gonna take a quick commercial break and we're gonna be right back.
Today's show has been sponsored by Farmers Insurance in Voorhees, New Jersey. To protect your assets and the people you love, call Mike Skoranek, your local Farmers Insurance agent, at 856-336-2553.
We are farmers. Bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee. I am your co-host, Mark Hook, along with the other co-host, Keith Reynolds, and we're talking to Scott Rudder from Burton Trent Public Affairs, LLC. So, Scott, we know that you have a very solid and strong political background. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the shows that you like to watch that are the real accurate depictions of what happens? I'll tell you why.
Political shows?
Yeah, I just started House of Cards not too long ago.
Right.
And it's fantastic.
Yes.
I really enjoy
Right.
watching that show because I believe what I'm watching is really how it is. And some shows do that a little bit better than others. So I was wondering if there's any that jump out to you that come to mind. Like, I love The West Wing. Again, I thought that's what it was really like.
Right.
But I know that it's a television show. It's not really like that.
Right.
You were there. You were in the pits. You were kind of entrenched in all of it. So
Right.
are there shows that are better than others? Are there any that you like that maybe you like it because it is so farcical and so stupid? And I don't know. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's interesting. First of all, love House of Cards. I mean, love first season. It's been, I understand. I haven't seen any recent episodes, but first season was phenomenal. Second season, it was really hard to take off of the first season. But so I worked in D.C. I worked for a congressman. There are elements of that are true. I mean, it is a very cutthroat business. Mm-hmm. But if you actually did a reality show of what actually happens, it's not that exciting. It would be the lowest ratings. I mean, come on. It is most of what we do when you're actually working is very mundane. You're debating, you're discussing, with your staff, with your peers, with your colleagues, with people from across the aisle on various issues. And yeah, sure, there are moments that are exciting, but for the most part, it's very mundane. There are policy positions that just get into the minutia and the weeds, and where you're just like, it is not exciting at all.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because in real life, it's mundane and it's boring, and you only see the clip when the senator brings a snowball into the House, and he wants to talk about climate change, and then the picture everywhere is this guy in a suit holding a snowball in this huge meeting.
Well, that's what we were talking about earlier. It's a soundbite society anymore, right? It's hashtags, it's whatever it is, 149 characters on Twitter and Facebook posts and links to articles. It's a snapshot society. But to going back to your original question, I mean, you do find yourself, if you're a political person, you watch these shows. And I imagine just like a lawyer would watching, Law and Order or some other show, you're kind of like, that's kind of true, but not really.
Right.
It is mostly boring, but I honestly, when West Wing was on, it was a Democrat administration. I'm a Republican, but that was awesome.
Yeah, it was a good show.
That was a really good show. And you saw that president, who again was a left-leaning president making hard decisions on national security and things like that, taking out terrorists. So you did see that where, you run for office. Again, I'm a Republican, so I would run for office for a smaller government, so forth. But you find yourself making decisions on things that have nothing to do with why you ran, because you're there.
Right.
So you have to vote on what's before you, not why you ran for office. You may ran for lower taxes, but then there's this health issue that you got to deal with. Mm-hmm. Then you start to roll into your compassion side of it. So most people that when you watch these shows, you get to see that dynamic. That you wouldn't necessarily attribute to an elected official, but once you're in that seat, you have to make the decision on what's presented to you.
Right.
So if you're president or a mayor and there's a controversy, or I'll give you an example. In 2004, I was deputy mayor of Medford Township. We had a significant, massive floods. I ran for office to help to provide smart growth for the town. It was growing too fast and to this and to that, and wanted to do some farmland preservation. I wanted to, preserve this and protect that, but then all of a sudden there's a flood. There's not just a flood, it's a massive flood, taking out streets and bridges and homes. It was a big issue. So, there are things that you all of a sudden are presented with as an elected official that you don't...
that you weren't expecting.
You weren't expecting.
Right.
Well, it goes back to even earlier we were talking about crisis communications. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So you're CEO of a corporation, and all of a sudden, one of your trucks within your fleet, ran off the road and crashed into something, and now you have to deal with that. There's issues. Same thing with elected officials. You have to deal with what's presented to you.
Right.
Very interesting. I don't know. I mean, do you think you could be a politician?
Do I think I could?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I absolutely think I could. Now, whether I would want to is a different story, because I always believe that there is power in making people change their minds and delivering the message, and I always felt that I could be a politician or a lawyer any sort of place where I would be able to change people's minds and to talk about stuff like that. But it's all of the garbage and minutia that goes along with it that I don't want any part of. I don't want my past dug up. I don't want my background and things that I did so long ago that don't impact the character that I am now.
Right.
I don't want to have to answer questions about that stuff.
I think
when
I
I
agree.
become huge, when I become a huge famous actor, that stuff is all going to come out anyway, right?
That's right.
So I don't want to fast track any of that stuff by
I
becoming
could
a
see
politician.
that. I could see
Well,
that.
you know, and that's the unfortunate side what you just said. That's where a lot of good people don't run for office, right? So that sort of scares people away, right?
Right.
You know, when I was 27, the internet was, Al Gore had just invented the internet. You know, there wasn't a lot of, you know, the social media that you're having today. You worried, at the worst, you worried about a weekly letter to the editor or something like that. Now it's just a constant deluge of criticisms or what have you. Again, left or right, you know, you get praised 100%, you get, you know, criticized 100%. So it is a different environment. A lot of people want to stay away from it. You know, it's a shame because, you know, you're looking for the best and the brightest, and you want them to run for office. You want captains of industry to say, you know, I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to serve my community in some fashion. You know, you see that in volunteer forces. You see that, you know, in local boards. You see more of that. But once you have to stand up and put your name on the ballot, you've opened yourself up to the political campaign component of elected office. You know, I always enjoyed, you know, as an elected official, my job, whether, you know, dealing with the public in whatever capacity I was dealing with the public. I did not like the campaign part. I like knocking on doors to meet people,
Right.
but I didn't like the mailers that came out, you know, that, you know, personal attacks and
Right.
all those things.
Right.
You know, so you enjoy the public interaction component of a campaign, you know, knocking on doors, going to different events and seeing people in that regard. Or you're just doing your job, you know.
Right.
You know, you're on the dais of, you know, the mayor or the council member of your town, or you're up at the state house as an assemblyman or whomever, whatever your job is, and you know, that type of thing I enjoyed. But the campaign part, to your point, that's the hardest part for sure.
Yeah.
You know, I think what would be a problem for me would be like, okay, your town meetings, how many people showed up?
Are we
On average.
if at a town hall event or a township council meeting? At a town hall event, we could have 200, 400 people because we promoted it. We wanted people to come out.
Right.
So we would work really hard because if we're taking the time out to go talk to people, we want people to be there.
Right.
Right.
So, you know, we would.
So how many people were in Medford Township?
How many people? Oh, well, that's different. So I'm talking about when I was in the assembly. So there's 23,000 people in Medford. At your normal council meeting, when I was there, you know, it's been almost 10 years since I was on council in Medford. But yeah, no, it's, you know, you'll have a handful that show up, and you know, unless there's a controversial issue. So
Right.
that's the thing.
Right.
So if it's your normal day-to-day stuff, we're talking about TV shows and
Right,
so
right.
your normal day-to-day stuff, no one shows up. Maybe one or two because, you know, the regulars, they're sort of the township watchdogs, and they want to make
Right.
sure things are done properly. But if it's a significant issue,
Yeah, they
and-
want to
and-
change a road or
Yeah.
something. Right.
Or there was one time I shut down a dog park. You know, I shut down. We have a beautiful dog park. You know, Medford Township in Freedom Park. It's got a wonderful dog park. 20 acres. I mean, it's
Beautiful.
unheard of
Phenomenal.
in New Jersey. And but you know, people weren't being responsible. Dog owners. Letting their dogs off leash as soon as they hit the parking lot, and you still had to go a couple hundred yards to get to the
Right.
park. You know, dogs attacking dogs. So you know, we shut it down. We shut it down because it was getting a little out of control. This is early on, and honest to goodness, you know, for shutting down the dog park, we had hundreds of people show up at council meetings demanding
Wow.
the park be open. You know, like that was the biggest issue in town.
Right.
You know, so it is
The dog
really
park.
it's the dog park. Honestly, you know, we're dealing with budgets and taxes
Right.
and so forth. You know, you get a handful of people show up. You shut down that dog park, man.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, you're going to upset a lot of people.
No, they're like kids. I mean, but the thing is, though, they're being. And that's what would bother me as being in the politics, because you know you have 23,000. You said in Medford Township, you know, a handful show up unless there's an issue. Even if there's an issue, you know, you have a couple hundred, but you have 23,000. So to me, and then all the people bickering about it, that would bother me.
Right.
I would be like, well, come out and.
I believe that most guys
Well-
get into politics with the right intentions. I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
believe that almost every politician that we see that becomes a public face, whether he's a local person that somehow gets exposure, or otherwise, that they've gotten into it for the right reasons, and then the machine spits them out as a different person almost.
Well, yeah, I mean, you run for most people start out, to your point, altruistically. I'm going to stop this from happening. I'm going to make sure we get this thing done. And again, you sort of like go through the process, and then you start to have to make decisions on things that not why you ran.
Right.
And it is, and it's the re-election part of life. But I will tell you, I've served. I've worked down in D.C. I've worked with members of Congress. I've worked for governors. I've worked for worked with as colleagues, council members, freeholders, assembly members, senators, and I will tell you, almost everybody's a solid character. I know people don't believe that,
right?
Because you have 120 legislators, but if one of them screws up, they're all of them are bad,
right?
Same thing with mayors. That most people have, the even when they're running for reelection, even through the whole process, they really do have the benefit of the people in mind. Most people don't believe that, but I'll tell you it's true. I'm out of office. I'm not running for reelection,
right?
So I'm telling you that as a fact,
right?
It is the bad characters there are bad characters in politics. I mean, it happens, but there's bad characters in every industry. So that's and that's what the media likes. They want to see the politician that took the bribe, or the one who shut down this business because of being vindictive or whatever the reason is. But that rarely happens. I mean, if you look at the number of municipalities in New Jersey and look at municipalities across the country, you hear about Chicago or Philadelphia or New York City. You hear about certain things that certainly, and then everybody gets painted the same. But it's a tough job. It's a tough business, and you have to have the skin and the attitude,
right.
To deal with it. Mm-hmm. And most elected officials have some level of ego, right? I mean, mm-hmm. Otherwise you're not running for office.
Right.
If your mentality is to sit in the back bench and just support things, then that's great. But most people who run for office have some sort of, an ego, and so sometimes that translates well.
And others.
Sometimes it doesn't. Right. So it really just depends on how they handle different situations.
And it's interesting because I think a lot of the captains of industry and the best and brightest business people that we have out there that might be interested, they don't get into it because they can't make the money that they can make doing other things. And that's why there's the big movement now is to take the money out of politics, to make it kind of back to a level playing field, to get everybody involved. And there's arguments both ways of that how do we attract better candidates to get them to leave the private sector to come in and serve their constituency. It's a tough dynamic right now. So it's really it
is tough, and there's not I guess so Pennsylvania, for example, they were looking at that as well. Let's get a full-time legislature. So this is a number. I don't think it's still a debate now, but it was a few years ago. So that the state legislators. That would be their full-time job, like a member of Congress. That's their full-time job. Mm-hmm. The thought behind it was good, to your point, so that they focus full-time on this. There's no outside influence on them, an employer or something like that.
Professional lawmakers.
Right. And that's what they would do. And then the backlash on that was dramatic, and as well as it should be.
Right.
On a personal level. Their attempt was to, hey, let's professionalize the business. Let's get people to focus on this full time. We'll give them a bump in salary and so forth and so on. So that sounded good until you look at it really deeply and apply that, in a real world.
Right.
And it's not really a good idea. For me, from my perspective, it's good to have elected officials who keep a foot in the private sector because they understand what profit and loss is about. They understand what the impact of government is on their industry. And they are better informed to make decisions than if this is all I did full time. So being isolated from the private sector, it's the private sector provides the taxes that funds the government. Mm-hmm. So if you isolate yourself from there, you sort of lose touch on what the impact's going to be if I make this environmental regulation, or if I do this tax increase on businesses or so forth, and what the impact to jobs would be. We're going to have a minimum wage debate coming up this November. There's going to be a question on the ballot. There necessarily needs to be a significant conversation on that because that's a well-intended idea. Mm-hmm. But the result on business could be disastrous.
Right.
Well, we got to wrap this up. This has been a great morning. A lot of interesting stuff. Great topic. Scott. So how can the viewers and listeners find out more information about your company?
Well,
where to find you?
Right. BurtonTrent.com. I mean, we're right there. We're right there on the web, and we have a Facebook page, and And look, what we do is we help businesses, we help people, and how they interact with the government. And if you have those challenges, you give us a call.
That's awesome.
Great.
Well, this is going to conclude our show for today, Morning Coffee. I'm Keith Reynolds here with Mark Cook. We will see you tomorrow, Morning Coffee.